Welcome back to Willoughby DIY. If you're new here, my name's Faith, and today I'm going to be showing you guys how to make amazing Christmas throw pillows using Dollar Tree placemats. So you'll need to pick out a couple of placemats, or however many you want, but make sure that they have 2 layers of fabric. So like this buffalo check one I picked out here has a black fabric on the back, and then this gorgeous little winter greenery one has a red fabric on the back as well. And get something to fill them with. I have this on hand, some buffalo snow that my mother-in-law gave me, so it was totally free for me. Thanks, Angie. And you can fill yours with whatever you have on hand, or go grab a cheap pillow and use the stuffing from that. That works as well. The first thing you want to do is create a hole in one end of your placemats. So I'm just taking my little scissors here and cutting some of the stitching and pulling it apart. Couldn't find my seam ripper, of course, but these scissors work just fine. You want to make the hole big enough for your hand to get into with a handful of stuffing in it, and that's about it. Once you have your opening, you can just stuff it full however much you want. I used about half this bag of the buffalo snow, and you can see I'm just pulling it out. It's actually like a large sheet of this stuffing stuff. It's like a mat to look like snow. So I'm just like pulling it out of there so it pulls apart, and then I take it in my hands and just kind of pull it apart and fluff it up so it's nice and fluffy. And there's no like uniform pieces of stuffing in there making my pillow look all wonky. Stuff it with as little or as much as you want, and then you can go ahead and stitch up the ends using some hot glue. And you can see I'm just putting a small line of hot glue on the edge of that fabric, and then I'm going to take each end of the opening and just pull it so that it just lays flat, and super easy that way, and it lines up perfectly. You can see here what I'm doing a little bit better. Yeah, you pull it like that and it just lays flat. It's super easy. Once you have it sealed up, you can decorate it. And for this one, I wanted it to have sort of a hand-sewn look to it, so I took this embroidery thread that I picked up at Michael's, and this yarn needle because it has a large eye, so I could actually thread it. I'm terrible with threading needles. And I put a knot on the end of my thread so that it doesn't go through my fabric. I started on the corners, and the first part was really hard because this is where the hot glue is, so it was a bit of a struggle. But once I got it through past the hot glue mess, it was a lot easier. And I'm just going around the outside edge of the seam and wrapping it around and going under and out. I don't know how to explain it. I'm not great at sewing, and I'm definitely not great at explaining things. So you'll see here in a second what I mean. It's about 1/4 inch from the edge of the fabric, and then each little stitch is about 1/4 inch apart, and they're going to lean a little to one side. And I'm just going to do this all the way around. And I definitely didn't want to fight with this thread, so I only got enough for like one side at a time. So you see me here just tying off one end. What I did was took the thread, stretched it out to measure along the edge of the pillow, and then I doubled, almost tripled the amount of thread I had, and then started sewing. So if you have more than you need for one side, you can just keep continuing around until you run out of thread. Then just tie it off and start a new one right where you left off. When you're done, trim up the ends, and I kind of glued them down a little bit so they don't pop out the front. I told you I'm not a great seamstress. So if I can do this, so can you guys. It took a little bit of time, about 30 minutes, but it was totally worth it. Now for the buffalo check one, I'm going with a different design on it, but we're gonna start the same way. We're gonna make a hole in our end, and then I took this window cling I picked up from Walmart like a year or 2 ago. I still haven't used it. I just want the stag head silhouette. I'm gonna take some wax paper and tape it onto this little window cling sheet, and then use a permanent marker to trace over the stag head or deer head, whatever you want to call it. You could easily go online and print a silhouette of a deer head. They have so many pretty ones I've seen when I Google searched it, but then I remember I had this, so that was just a little bit easier for me. Usually I added some greenery here, but I end up not going with that because I'm using burlap. So what we're going to do is just cut a piece of burlap the size you need for the stag head. I picked this up at Michael's a while back on clearance for $5. You can use whatever fabric you want. I just thought burlap would look nice with it. But I'm going to take my deer head, cut it out, and then tape it on top of the burlap. Now, if I was smarter, I would have used some pins to hold this. It's essentially a pattern, to hold this pattern onto the fabric like you would any other fabric pattern. But like I said, I'm not a seamstress, and these things only come to me after the fact. So I taped it down and then just used it as a guide. Used the wax paper stencil as a guide to cut out the burlap, which worked fine. It's just a little tedious because you got to make sure you're holding it nice and tight together, and just take it slow and be careful, especially around the antlers. Maybe leave off any tiny details. If you have more tiny details in your silhouette, it's fine. Like, I didn't put some of the little prongs on the antlers. It's okay. Be careful with it though. If you're using burlap, burlap is a pain and it likes to fall apart. But take your head and center it on your placemat. I added a bit of just a dot of hot glue in the middle to hold them in place, and then I'm going to go to work adding some hot glue around the edges and just all over to glue him down to the placemat. Be careful to not have a bunch of hot glue seeping out the edges, because if, like me, you have hot glue that wants to dry white or almost white, very cloudy looking, it won't look very great. So from a distance, mine looks perfect. But if you get too close, it's a little less so. Like I said, you see right there, be careful with the burlap. I just pulled that antler right off. But it's okay. I'm just going to glue him back together. It's going to be fine. Once I have my stack head glued on, I took some Dollar Tree jute twine and outlined him using the twine and some hot glue. Probably too much hot glue in some places. If you have one of those hot glue guns that has the precision tip, this will be super easy for you. Otherwise, make sure you're only adding a tiny bit of hot glue, just enough to hold the twine down, and do it in small sections so you can let that fully adhere to the fabric before moving on, because you don't want to pull it off of there and then have some crazy mess of glue spread across your placemat. Something you could do to sort of mitigate the hot glue mess that I ended up with is maybe take the silhouette and put it on a glass plate or a non-stick surface, and then add the border of jute around it. Let it cool, remove it from whatever surface you added it to, and then glue it onto your pillow. Once you have him fully outlined and he's looking absolutely gorgeous, you can let the hot glue completely cool off and start stuffing your pillow. So I used the other half of that buffalo snow to stuff this pillow. I did take this lighter and go over the jute. I don't recommend this, just a warning. If you do this, please be careful. Don't catch your pillow on fire. I just wanted to sort of soften up some of that hot glue and get rid of the scraggly bits on jute. But once that's all done and your pillow is stuffed, you can seal it up with some hot glue just like we did to the other one, and this little guy is complete. And I think these turned out beautifully. They actually go pretty well together, which I wasn't expecting. I honestly thought they wouldn't go too well together. So I think I'm going to put them both on my little entryway bench here. This one, I love this fabric pattern. Like, I had to do something with this when I saw it. It's just so pretty. And it really looks hand sewn. It's got that rustic hand sewn look to it with the stitching on the side. It's just perfect. And this guy may not be perfect, but it is still my favorite pillow. Absolutely. Sure, it was a little more tedious than the first pillow, but it was totally worth it. It looks so cool. Yeah, the antler's a little wonky, but it's okay. It's okay. Let me know which one of these pillows is your favorite in the comments down below, and if you've ever made a pillow using a placemat before. This is my first time. Thanks so much for watching, you guys. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you tap that like button. Maybe subscribe if you haven't already. Tap that notification bell so you know every time I upload. I hope you all have a holly jolly day, and I'll see you guys next time.